Hi, I'm Brian Crombie, and we're going to be talking on the Brian Crombie Show. We're going to be talking about politics, arts, business, and social issues on the Brian Crombie Show on Canada One TV. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Show on Canada One TV. October 24th is Election Day in Mississauga. Actually, Election Day across Ontario for municipal governments, and we've actually got some candidates for mayor that are running. I've interviewed a few already. I'm going to interview a few more, and tonight I want to introduce to George Tavares, who's running for mayor of Mississauga. We've interviewed some other council candidates and some candidates in Brampton and elsewhere in Pierre. But tonight, it's all about George Tavares and mayor. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So tell us a little bit about your background, what you've been doing, how long you lived in Mississauga, and why the heck would you want to run for mayor?
Oh, good question. Born in Toronto. We moved to Mississauga in 1979.
1979?
And then we quickly had to move out a week later because we had that train derailment thing you may have heard about.
Yep.
And then a week later we moved in for good.
So were you actually part of the...
Oh, we were less than a block away.
Really? So you're right, Mavis and...
so at the time I was on Mavis and... Just not too far away from Mavis and Dundas. The bed shook, we fell over, we had cousins over. We hightailed it out of there once the evacuation thing, it was epic.
So the earth moved for you.
The earth moved for us, yes it did. So a week later we came back and we stayed there for good. Went to George Brown College, studied electronic engineering technology, really enjoyed that, and then I went to York University and University of Toronto for a couple of different business things, and really enjoyed it, and then I kind of went out in the real world, became a big boy. Mm-hmm. So I went around the world doing various business needs, from negotiating business transactions to installing machines and everything in between, and came back to Canada and figured it was time to stay. So 4 years ago, my wife and I had talked about it. We thought maybe it's time to give up the travel, find yourself a full-time job that keeps you in Mississauga. So we've done that.
And so politics is the next step then?
So politics is definitely the next step, yeah.
Why run for mayor?
Well, great question. So, 8 years ago, we had a mayor that graduated from mayorship. So that was Hazel McCallion. She was fantastic, and everybody loved her. So big shoes to fill, and we watched Bonnie and Steve, because they were the two that were kind of back to back fighting it out. And of course, Bonnie, of course, won. So that was neat. And there was a transition there. So the political ideology was a little odd. So when then 4 years ago, we had a new election, and the candidates were interesting, but I'm not quite sure I would say that they were polished for politics. So my wife and I, we'd been talking about possibly me getting into politics. And one of the problems that we had was we didn't think that the representation for mayor at that time was good. So my wife and I talked about it. What would it take to be a good mayor? And she said, well, if you don't get your MBA, you don't do something with your political science, you're not going to be considered a legit. So COVID came in. There was a lot of opportunities to take online courses, but after COVID hit, a lot of these courses were available. So I managed to get my mini MBA and my diploma in political science. And just to not be outdone, I went out and got my Aboriginal Studies, Canadian Aboriginal Studies.
Aboriginal Studies, really?
Yes, University of Alberta provides it for online, and I think everybody should take it. It was eye-opening, and it was heartbreaking, but it was fantastic.
Really? That's interesting.
So it really teaches you a lot more about Canadian history, and that's something that I needed to absorb.
Why, after a long career in business internationally and stuff like that, would you want to do a mini MBA?
I'm not one to shy away from a very difficult challenge, and this was one of them. So this was the one thing that I thought would scare me the most.
Really?
Yes.
And in the end, did it?
Yeah, I'm terrified. the history of Mississauga, there's a lot of change that's going on in Mississauga, and there's a lot of new development, and there's a lot of old mistakes.
Old mistakes like what?
Well, we were talking about earlier the two developments, the Brightwater and the Lakeview, correct?
Yep.
And we know that we've got some problems with transit. So that's two big problems, at least at those two locations. And the developments look beautiful, right? So both of them, on paper they look fantastic, but they kind of missed the mark on a few things.
Like what?
Well, they could have widened the road so that we had better bike lanes. The walkability needed to be there, and it's not. The Brightwater one, it has a lot of challenges, but the Lakeview one is an interesting one because unlike Port Credit, Port Credit is a happening place. It's a lot of fun, really good. And you make your way over to Lakeview, it seems to lack character. I'm sure it's going to change once we put the new development
Lakeview
in.
hasn't had a view of the lake since before World War I.
It hasn't. No, it hasn't. It has a wonderful marina there, which I have a boat, and it's a lot of fun to sit there. But it's really quiet, unlike Port Credit. So I'm really happy to see that that's going to it's going to liven up.
Yeah.
But until we get some sort of transit in there and working transit, we're going to have a real difficult time kind of getting people in and out. So that's just
transit for South Mississauga is one of your priorities, I take it.
So this is where you and I are going to have a little bit of a challenge because I know you really like that LRT and you really push that LRT.
Which one?
The light rail up Huron-Ontario.
No, actually, I'm not.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies.
No, I think that, and I've been a long proponent that I thought that the LRT should have been built across Dundas. The vast majority of people go east-west, and the buses on Dundas are the most used buses in all of Mississauga.
No.
Huron-Ontario is also well used, but I think that the bigger solution is all-day two-way go. And if you have all-way two-way frequent GO train service on that Milton Mississauga line to the Cooksville GO train station, I wish there was some way to divert it to square one or closer to square one. That's the solution, because the vast majority of people don't go between Port Credit and Brampton. What
Correct.
they do is they go east-west. They go to downtown Toronto. I do think that the BRT that's been built to the Airport Corporate Centre is smart, because that Airport Corporate Centre is the second largest employment zone in all of Canada.
Right. And I agree with you. All of your points are good. I might disagree with you with where the LRT should be going, although I do believe east-west is correct. I don't believe it should be going across Dundas. I do believe it should be going across from Brampton, down across Huron-Ontario, and all the way across from the 407 to the 407 line in Vaughan. And that's the upper portion of the transit, Toronto Transit. And I think that's where the drop-off point and pickup point. I would love to have seen that.
So from Brampton down to the 407, not the 403, the 407.
407.
And then across the 407.
Correct. I know it sounds
To where?
strange. I know it sounds there's a stop called 407, coincidentally, at the end of the TTC. So the
subway.
So the subway.
The Vaughan Metro Centre.
Correct. So it would be a great place to put that. But our transit problem has to be corrected.
Okay.
So one of the big problems that we have is that I don't think our lights are timed properly. So I'm a big fan of technology, not trains.
Right.
So this is going to sound very odd, but because I'm a technical guy, I look at things just a little bit different. So if all of the buses had a transponder and we timed it properly using the if-then software, you can get the buses to go down here in Ontario or east-west, Dundas, any of the streets. If you time it properly, using the transponders, the lights will turn green as the bus picks up its persons, moves over into its lane and moves all the way through. So it would keep transit going.
Keep transit going, even if it's surface.
So, correct.
Because that's the big challenge with a lot of the BRTs and the LRTs. If they're on the surface, they're slower than car traffic because you got to stop and pick people up and stop for traffic.
So there's a philosophy that you can't go any faster than the slowest vehicle.
Yep.
And I agree with that. So the idea is to increase the speed of those vehicles. So the beauty of this idea is if you can't just, you don't just limit it to the buses. Using those loop sensors that we have in the roadways and using the if-then software, you can move cars quicker so that they can continue through with less stops, less frequency stops, and you can kind of get them moving.
So
as
get
well.
everyone moving faster.
So get everybody moving faster. And I've seen this work, and this is going to sound very strange, but I've seen this work in the food industry. So it's called indexing. So you know how you get these cookies coming all these conveyor belts. They have to go through metal detectors for safety. I'm sorry, to go through for safety, and they have to go individually. So they stack these by going a little bit quicker on one of the conveyors and then a little bit shorter, and it's called indexing. So they index all of the food, and then they eventually index them back and then put them into their crates. So this technology has existed.
The technology exists. It's been perfected with cookies. We just got to apply it to cars and buses.
I'm a man that believes it.
Makes sense.
Cookies will help the world. I'll take it.
Sounds good to me. George Tavares, he's running for mayor of Mississauga. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with George in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Hour on Canada One TV. We're chatting tonight with George Tavares, who's running for mayor of Mississauga. And we've had a good conversation about transit, and George is very impassioned about making sure transit works and using some technology from some other sectors of society to apply it to buses and to cars to make it more efficient. But let's broaden it, if we could, George, and talk about some other issues.
Sure.
After transit, what do you think the big issue is in Mississauga?
Well, the low-hanging fruit, of course, is the affordable housing issue.
Right, yeah.
So Mississauga passed a motion, and and I remember you were talking to Mr. Butt about this, and it was great, your interview with him. And we talked about the definition of what affordable housing was. And if memory serves, it was 40% of a person's annual income.
Median income, yeah.
Median income.
40% of your income is what you're supposed to spend on housing. If you spend more than that, then it's no longer affordable.
Right. And I love the idea that they defined it. That was really, really important. But the other thing that I think they missed the mark on is that they didn't define what affordable housing meant. So does it mean a single bedroom? Does it mean options for a parking spot? Because if you're talking condos, we know that you can either get one with a parking spot or one without. So I'd like them to have those opportunities so that you can live comfortably. The idea of living in Mississauga shouldn't come at the idea of living or affording to live in the city of Mississauga shouldn't come at the comfort of a person.
So the report came out recently that Mississauga and Toronto are something like the 4th and 5th least affordable cities
Correct.
In all of North America.
Yes.
Why do you think that is?
That's a very, it's an unusual question because I don't want to say that it's because the people need a certain amount of money in order to live. I know that housing went a little too high. The price of housing went a bit too high.
Why? Why did housing prices go up?
My personal opinion?
Yeah.
I think we lowered the requirements to get a loan or secure a loan for a particular home. I think that there was some overseas investing that had happened that we didn't cap early.
Yeah.
So those are the two big ones.
So CMHC did a major study, and they said that, yes, foreign investment was a certain amount. I think
Correct.
it was 10 to 15%. And they said, I was surprised by this, that low interest rates were like 10 or 15%.
Yeah.
That the vast majority of the issue was lack of supply by governments. And so it's the time to get approval, the red tape to get approval, the citizens organizations that hamper your ability to get
Correct.
approval. They were very critical of government and NIMBYism,
Yep.
and said that was the biggest reason why housing in Toronto and Mississauga and Vancouver were unaffordable. And they actually did a study that said that the typical city in the United States, you could get approved in half the time.
Right. And the NIM is not in my backyard. I get it. I'm typically one of them, or can be one of them, on certain things.
We all are.
We all are. You're right about the availability, but we're not making any more land. There's not a lot of land left in Mississauga.
So the provincial government, what they've done is they've asked Mississauga to grow up. In density and height. And also they put forward this policy recently of making you, if you're successful, a super mayor,
Right.
such that your vote would be effectively equal to 5 councillors
Right.
on city council.
Right.
What do you think of those two policies? Does that make sense?
So the strong mayor, not a big fan of it. I think we live in a democracy, and I think if I can't convince my fellow councillors that this is a good idea, then I shouldn't. It shouldn't go.
Okay.
Shouldn't pass. So that's one of the first ones. The growing up rather than out. We have no other option.
Yeah.
Because we don't have a lot of space left. But I'm not a big fan of going too high. We had the height restrictions for a reason, but I think the big problem is that we're working on a playbook that's 30 years old. And 30 years ago, we had lots of land. The land was cheap, gas was inexpensive, and housing was affordable. So we're using 30-year-old plans for new development, and it's not going to work. So we have to come up with a newer idea. Newer ideas for development, newer ideas.
What's that newer idea?
I haven't come up with that yet. Okay. But I need to speak with all of the councillors and find out what they want. I know that we definitely need affordable housing, and we need more of it. And I think
my kids couldn't afford to buy a home in Mississauga today.
You mentioned that. You mentioned that a couple of days ago when you were talking to Mr. Budd. Is that right?
Yeah.
You were speaking with him, and I think that's heartbreaking. It really is heartbreaking, and I can't imagine that they would be comfortable living in an 800 square foot condo with no parking.
Well, that's what the kids are doing these days, right? Because they can't afford to get a house, so they are living in downtown with really small condos. And you take a look at some of the developments that have been proposed around here. That's what is in demand because that's what's affordable, regrettably.
But if they had an opportunity or a choice to live in a 2,000 square foot bungalow or
they couldn't afford it unless it was in out of Mongolia.
Agree.
Not quite out of Mongolia, but a long way away.
No, I'm well aware. Yeah, no, I understand, and I totally get it. So the idea of growing up is one of the only options that we have.
Yeah.
But land is sacred. Land is really sacred, and me telling developers that they can't make money off of their development seems a little outside of good ideas for businesses, or a good idea for business. Did I make sense there or no?
So what's the solution? If the developer has to make money, and that's the only way they're going to develop.
The solution is it's going to be taller, smaller, better.
Taller, smaller, better.
Yes. So smaller,
more compact.
Yep. A little bit taller.
Yep.
And then of course the quality of living has to still be there. The standard of living still has to.
Square one. We talked for eons about redeveloping Square One into something more like a downtown. What do you think about that? Is that something that you would have as one of your priorities? Or,
nothing. Everything's on the table. Everything is on the table, provided that we have decent transit and we can move people. That's absolutely one of the options.
What do you think about taxes, property taxes in Mississauga?
I would love to freeze property tax for anybody that currently lives in the city of Mississauga.
Okay, safety, is it an issue?
Absolutely.
Why?
People riding their bikes. I just had this argument discussion with a bike rider. I was on Dixie. You know how they have the painted lines, and one of the guys was riding on the sidewalk. So I thought that was a bit odd. I pull over and I kind of wave him down. I asked, why weren't you riding on the bike path? And he said, because it's unsafe. And I thought, how is it unsafe? And I asked. He said, because there's concrete pieces. There's aggregate all over the place. And he said, go take a look. So we took a look, and at one point in time, truck going up and down, it must have shaken loose aggregate and gravel and whatnot. So he was terrified that he was going to ride on this thing, fall over. So painted lines don't make it safe, and we're not maintaining the roads or the bike paths. So it's really difficult for me to say that it's safe.
Some people, there's an organization downtown Toronto that believes that it's too difficult to unseat an incumbent in municipal politics. Far more difficult in municipal politics than in provincial or federal because you don't have the party affiliation. And so therefore they've made 2 recommendations. Okay. One is called preferential voting, where when you go to the ballot box, you don't only choose your first choice, but you choose your second, third, fourth. And so therefore you keep on adding people that fall off the bottom up in their second and third choices until someone gets 51%.
Right.
And their argument is that the incumbent will probably be in the lead, because of name recognition, but there's
Sure.
a better chance for, someone lower down, number 2 or number 3, once they get some of the other people to vote for them
Yep.
to beat them. And then the second thing that they've argued is for term limits, and that you shouldn't, be able to be in politics forever, though, frankly, Hazel McCallion was in for a long time and
She
people
was.
thought highly of her. I'm doing some work in Dallas right now, and term limit there is 2 times. You can only be in there 8 years. And that's what you apply to the U.S. president, et cetera. What do you think of those 2 policies?
I love them both. I like the 2-term. I was thinking about that not too long ago, whether or not that would be a good idea, because you need new ideas. I think if you're in the position of mayor, you're going to be thinking ahead maybe 8 years. And it's going to be really difficult to think any further ahead because your plan that you do today will probably take 8 years to make. Mm-hmm. So the next group would have to come in and figure out what to do for the following 8. Now, I'm sure, I won't be looking for, it won't be difficult for me to find a job after 8 years, run for mayor.
Right.
But
so you'd be supportive of term limits?
I would be.
Okay.
I absolutely would be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some people have been arguing that Mississauga should separate from Peel and become its own city and not have regional government anymore. What do you think of that idea?
That has a lot of challenges because we share a lot of things, police services and fire services. It would probably not be the best idea.
Why? Just because you're sharing the services?
It would cost us a lot more money.
Becomes uneconomic?
It would be completely uneconomic. Right now, our budget, I think, and I just did the numbers this morning, $538 million was our budget. The very first top line item was fire and safety for Peel Region, and that was 22% of our budgets. And then I'm thinking I couldn't imagine separating from Peel and being our own thing. What that number would be.
What that number would do.
That would probably skyrocket. If you think 5% this year was a lot of an increase, then
so there was a study done in I think it was 1997 mm-hmm. By an organization sponsored by the Ontario government that said rather than separating out all these cities, what they should do is amalgamate all the cities. They recommended the amalgamation of Toronto, mm-hmm. which the Harris government actually went ahead and implemented. But they also recommended the amalgamation of Peel. Mm-hmm. Actually, it was Mississauga and Brampton. They wanted Caledon to go to the region north of it.
Right.
The amalgamation of Burlington, Oakville, and Milton into a new city.
Yep.
Vaughan, Markham, Richmond Hill, Thornhill, Stouffville into a new city. And then Durham, Ajax, Whitby, Oshawa into a new city. And then there would be 5 cities, mm-hmm. Toronto and 4 around it. And that would form a new GTA Metro Council like the old Metro Council that Toronto used to have.
Right.
What do you think of that idea?
Toronto hasn't figured out how to do it themselves. They've been working on that for years already, and they haven't figured it out. Everybody I know that's in Etobicoke still calls it Etobicoke. They still have an Etobicoke City Hall. Vaughan still has their own city hall. I don't see it happening.
Forget amalgamation.
I can't imagine. Today.
Okay, if you're elected,
maybe not tomorrow, but today it doesn't look like it's.
If you're elected mayor,
and
I was asking for your vision for 8 years from now, so we're talking about 2030.
Yep.
What's your vision for 2030 in Mississauga?
So it would be more transit, lower traffic, safety for anybody on bikes, pedestrians, and I'd really like a place in Bridgewater, but that's not happening.
If you knocked on my door and I opened it up and I gave you 1 minute to give me your pitch, why should I vote for you?
All right, so my name is George Tavares. I'm running for mayor of Mississauga. And I already know the first question you're going to ask is, who's this guy? And why wasn't he running 4 years ago? But I wasn't ready 4 years ago. So in the past 4 years, I managed to study and get my mini MBA, political science, and my Canadian Indigenous Studies. So now I think I'm prepped. So I don't think the city of Mississauga is representing you well, Brian. I think I can do it. Our council does a really great job. They come up with some great ideas and they implement it. But you need a mayor that's nonpartisan, hasn't been involved in any of the sidebars that are going on. And I'm your guy. What do you think, Brian?
What's your website?
Tavaresformayor.ca.
Tavaresformayor.ca. I wanted you to introduce George Tavares tonight because I want you to think about your franchise that you've been given, the right that you've been given, the responsibility, frankly, that you've been given to think about the people that are running for council, both mayor and as well as all the different council candidates, and go out and vote hopefully think about it before you go out and vote. Hopefully do a little bit of research and think about the person that can best represent you, that has the policies that you think are important. George has got some interesting policies. You know, if I was running, I'd probably give you a whole different list, and maybe some of them would be the same. But, you know, what matters the most is that someone like George is putting his name forward to be on a ballot. Give him the respect to figure out whether he's any good, to listen to him and his policies and decide whether or not you want to vote for him. And then on October 24th, really, please do the whole city of Mississauga a favor and go out and vote, no matter who you vote for. And frankly, even if you go out and vote and put down none of the above, vote, because I think it's our responsibility. It's our collective responsibility. And George is putting in the effort to make our city better. Lots of other people are as well. Let's give them the time of us in thinking through who we want to support. Thank you for joining us tonight. That's our show. I'm Brian Crombie. This is the Brian Crombie Show on Canada One TV. Good night, everybody.